Hey yo, it is Guido coming at you with a Tactics Talk. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. I've got a brand new Tier 6 American TD, a premium here. This is the T78. Meet the T78 Tier 6 American TD. We're going to do a review on this bad boy, and I will do the standard thing. We'll give an overview. Look at the tech tree considerations. Although it is a premium, we're just going to look at crews and what it can train for. Take a look at the 3D model. Do a comparison amongst its peers at Tier 6. Look at my stats after 20 games, my setup, and I'll give you 3 examples of gameplay for the new American T78. It's on sale right now. Just in case you haven't bought it and you're thinking about it, maybe we can give you the answer right here, whether it is yay or nay, thumbs up or thumbs down. You should know by the time we're done with this review. For you personally, anyway. Let's move on to the overview. The first thing I think you will do when you're taking a look at this is you will immediately compare it to the Hellcat. And at first I thought it was actually just a reskinned Hellcat, but it is not. You can tell the Hellcat is actually quite different. You can see that the tracks, the chassis is different, and it turns out that this is actually a T24 chassis, upgunned to a 90mm and basically turned into a TD in July 1943. So proposed in 43, featured the 90mm from the M36. They did a little testing on it. They never really made a prototype. It was sort of a mock-up with an existing T24 apparently, and it was never built. So this is just one of those idea tanks. Lots of those, especially mid to late World War II, as they were basically throwing everything at the wall and seeing what stuck as far as designing tanks, trying to react to what the Germans were doing and learning from the Germans and Soviets in their big tank battles on the Eastern Front. And of course what they learned from North Africa initially on that invasion. So amongst its peers here, like I said, it's close to a Hellcat, although the numbers are very similar. The Excalibur is just very strange. The Nashorn, a different idea, right? It's not a turreted TD, and that's the big thing about this and the Hellcat and the various other turreted American TDs, that it has a turret, and that gives it a lot of flexibility that a casemate does not have. The Achilles has a turret, more standard type of, I think this is the M36 as well, don't quote me on that. AT-8, very different. Of course, the massively awesome gun carrier, probably one of the best tanks in the game. And we got the ARL, one of the strangest looking tanks in the game for sure. The IKV, and then the Chinese Soviet knockoff that starts to look like what the Soviet/Chinese tanks or tank destroyers will look past Tier 6. So as you can see, just a pretty small, and that actually is to its benefit as far as taking shots at it. Decently angled armor, but it's just not very thick. A pretty big mantlet that's decently thick, so that gives it some capability on poking over ridges. We'll talk about that as we go. Let's take a look at the text. Because it is a premium, you will find obviously that it comes with the top module, so there's nothing to talk about as far as unlocking goes. As a trainer for the American TD lines, it's a bit of a mixed bag. There's 2 lines. There's the casemate line and the turreted line, and what's interesting is the casemate line is actually lined up better as for a trainer with the new T78. The T25AT, if we take a look at it, has 4 commander, gunner, driver, loader. That's the same loadout as the T78, and that's the same for the T28 and the T95, interestingly. There are only 4 crew members in there. However, you get to the 110E3, and we are going to add another loader, so that's not going to work perfectly. Obviously, you can train your 110E3 crew in your T78, but you're going to be missing out on the 1 loader. It's even worse over here on the other side. The Hellcat has 5 crew members, the T25 2, also I believe 5, so the radio operator is going to be left out in the cold while running the T78. Same thing here for the prototype. The T30 I believe is exactly the same. Nope, there's actually an extra loader. There are 6 guys in a T30, and then the 110E4 I believe goes down to 5. Yeah, there you go. But it's 2 loaders and not a radio operator. So, like I said, a bit of a mixed bag. It will work for all those tanks, but there'll be a little mixing and matching, and some of your guys in some of those tanks will not get any training when the rest of the crew is driving around in your T78. We'll move on to the 3D model, such as it is anyway. Well, what can you say about the 3D model? It just doesn't have a whole lot of armor. We'll talk about the numbers. It's right here, though. It's something around 25 on the whole, which is double what a Hellcat is, but still not much. Probably helps you out a bit with the overmatching, because there almost always will be a little bit of angle going on, so those 75, 76 millimeters might have a hard time just overmatching your hull automatically, kind of like the Hellcat is. the Hellcat's overmatched by nearly anything, almost no matter what angle it puts on. The turret is okay, and then we've got some mantlet armor here. Now the model is showing this, see this gray area is supposedly less. I don't know if that line is actually really there. If you go over and look at the model on, basically look at the tank in the garage, there doesn't seem any indication that that part of the mantlet is specifically weaker. And if we go over to the collision, it's still there. So I don't know if there's some known weakness or there's a line there for some reason. It doesn't really show very obviously on the actual model of the tank. So I'll be honest, I'm not sure if it's there, but otherwise a pretty good mantlet. And like I mentioned earlier, what that will allow you to do is a little bit of ridge poking with the nice -10 gun depression and have a reasonable expectation of bouncing lower caliber, lower tier shots. Obviously at tier 9 and some of the others, they're just going to butter through even at, well, 300 is pretty good, but if you go to here and it's sitting at 188, anything with, 200 pins not going to struggle too much to go through it. And even something with 192 pin with a decent roll is going through you as well. Angles have to be taken into account and all that good stuff. All right, let's look at a comparison amongst its peers. So the comparison against its peers actually tells an interesting story that's partly the story of the Hellcat, which has for a long time been known as a very good tank. Had a recent nerf, I want to say, in the last year, maybe a little over a year. Hell, it could be 2 years, I'm not exactly sure. And then the rest of the stable lanes. What I found interesting is that the DPM on the T78, we'll just jump down there right now, is on the low side amongst the rest of them. You look at the Nashorn at 2300, the AT8 at 2200. Even the ARL, which is not really known for much of anything, is at 1956. And the vaunted Churchill CGC is, or CG, Churchill GC, there we go. Churchill GC is sitting at 1900, and it actually has the edge on the Hellcat, which surprised me just a little bit. So obviously everything about the Hellcat is not it's necessarily just its DPM. As we all know, it's more than likely its mobility, which is part of the story of the T78 because it's got decent mobility. But let's back up a little bit and talk about the Alpha is 240, which is on the high side, pretty good, not quite at the GC, the CGC level. But 240 is definitely usable at tier 6, but the pen is very low. Look at this. Just about, if not the lowest in class, and the Hellcat shares the same pen. Now, it's got a gold round that gives you a little bit more. I thought that was interesting. I really thought the Hellcat's pen was much better than that. But it is not. The rate of fire is decent. Reload time at 7.96, a slight edge on the Hellcat. Gun traverse for the turret is actually okay. Still slow. The Hellcat is abysmally slow at 16 degrees. But you will notice with the T78, you do struggle to keep your turret online, and you'll be definitely needing to turn your hull and your turret at the same time to keep those pesky faster tanks from circling you too badly. There are several faster tanks you will never keep up with at 20 degrees plus its hull, which we'll talk about in a minute. -10 is very good, plus 20. So -10 is tied for best in class. That's very comfortable, a good ridge fighter with the decent mantlet. It does okay at that, provided you're not trying to poke against some big guns. 1.92 on the aiming time is a little slower than the Hellcat at 1.63, and the dispersion, which is blocked, and let me fix that for you, is 0.36, which is pretty atrocious. The ARL's at 0.37. Everything else is much, much better at tier 6. So 0.36 is something you're going to want to use food, you're going to want to use directives, you're going to want to have brothers in arms and use all the different skills that improve your aim time or whatever it is you can put on equipment-wise to improve aim time and dispersion stuff so that the gun does not become a bit of a liability, and it kind of is. So I think we'll show that a little bit on my replays, that you're really going to want to zoom all the way in, and that's really the biggest difference between the T78 and the Hellcat. They're carrying essentially the same gun. The T78 has a slight advantage in DPM, not enough to really matter too much, but the gun handling is quite a bit worse. Definitely quite a bit worse, and that will be the biggest weakness of this tank. Survivability, a few more hit points in the Hellcat, lower than just about everything else in class or tied. So these two tanks do not have a lot of staying ability. Add that to the bad armor, and you really got a tank that you want to keep out of harm's way if you want to survive for any amount of time in a game. 550 power on the engine makes it top in class, but that doesn't matter. What really matters is what's your specific power, and it's pretty high. So this is a sprightly tank, not quite Hellcat accelerate, get up and go sprightliness, but not bad. And the top end of the Hellcat at 72 well better than T78, but you will find the T78 to be definitely zippy. It's not going to dance around and accelerate super fast, but once it gets up to speed, it can get around the battlefield, it can relocate, it can run away as long as you plan it early enough. Remember that your whole traverse is kind of slow and your turn rate is not great, but if you plan your maneuvers in advance a little bit, you'll find that you can use that speed to get out of danger. Obviously, if you get seen while running, you're in trouble because there's no armor to bounce a single thing. There's a traverse speed at 31, which is decent. Concealment's actually pretty darn good at 18, not quite as good as the Hellcat. I think the Hellcat's a little more low slung there, so pretty good concealment. And spotting at 370 is top in class, so tied for top in class with the other two American-built types of tanks, the Hellcat and the Achilles. So 370 is definitely usable. You might want to think about some kind of optical aid as far as optics or perhaps binoculars, things like that for that first look, which is extremely valuable at the low to mid tiers. Obviously it's valuable everywhere, but it's extremely valuable at low to mid tiers when you might be fighting crews that are not that great. You can really outspot them with not much effort in equipment and crews. So what would I say overall after the comparison on this, looking at the other tanks out there? Decently mobile chassis. The gun is good if you can hit with it, but it is a bit of a liability as far as its soft stats and its gun handling. So as long as you're careful with the gun, and we'll see this a little bit on my replays that I show you, as long as you're careful with the gun and plan carefully with the tank, it can be quite a beast. But if you get caught out or you are taking shots that are not quite zoomed, you're going to end up missing and losing out on damage and potentially exposing yourself to which you cannot take much return fire, and you'll be out of the game pretty quickly. So I believe you're really looking at a pretty high skill cap and a high skill floor type of tank, much like the Hellcat. If you're a very, very good player, you can absolutely dominate in the Hellcat. If you're not a very good player, it's going to be an off and on tank for you, and it's going to feel like it gets murdered quite a bit. All right, let's move on. So how did I do? I played 20 battles for you guys. The average experience is 723. We'll kind of compare it to the Jackson and the Hellcat. The problem with my Hellcat numbers, though, is there are a lot of company battles and the tier 6 strongholds and other things with the Hellcat that sort of skew those numbers. Obviously I did really well in that tank at 71%, but you're talking about a lot of good callers, and most of those battles were years and years ago when the Hellcat dominated in such things. But that being said, I'm still averaging 920 XP in it, and XP was not that easy to come by in some of those situations, so I think that's kind of interesting on the Hellcat as far as the numbers go. The Jackson, maybe a closer comparison at 59%, 619, slightly lower average XP, and only 54 battles, and I'm sitting at 45% win rate. Now, what's interesting to me about the T78 and my win rate, these numbers pretty much coincide with the rest of these tanks that are doing well. So if I look at 1,167, I look at the Jackson, I'm at 1,075, and all the numbers 2.28, 1.97, 2.42, 2.4 is actually better. So low sample size. I think this is probably, for me, solo, a 55 to 60% tank, somewhere in there. What I also found interesting about this is I'm sitting at a 40% battles survived. Again, let's not extrapolate too much out of a low sample size, but when I'm winning, I'm surviving most of those battles, which means I'm probably being much more careful in my winning games and being a little bit sloppy on my losing games. And that goes back to what I was talking about earlier. If it gets caught out, if you get in the wrong position, this thing will disappear from the battle really quickly as far as getting obliterated. But if you can be sneaky, stay out of sight, ambush things, you're going to have a really good experience with the tank. So 68.6, there's my hits. That's lower than I would like to be. If we look at the Jackson, what's it running? 74. The Hellcat, 75. So you can tell that I'm having a little bit of trouble making sure I zoom in, taking a few more snapshots before I'm zoomed in than I need to be. And that's just something learning the tank and starting to get used to how the tank itself plays right there. Armor use is now down near 0, so you can see it just really, I don't even know if I would call the mantlet situational armor. It's not great. I guess really, while this thing can ridge poke, don't count on that mantlet. Just say, hey, if I get a bounce, hooray for me, and high five yourself and move on. But do not poke out thinking, all right, I'll just bounce this one off my mantlet, because it's probably not going to happen. 0.6 enemies spotted. Now that's good. That means I'm at least staying back a little bit. I'm not YOLOing too much, but somewhere along the way I'm getting exposed too much, and that's probably my mid-game play, and this is not where it needs to be as far as staying back a little bit. 1.45 enemy destroyed. I managed a 2,421 damage game, 3 kills, and I will have, I believe, a class 1. Yes, so I've got a class 1 as the best thing there. So let's move on to my setup. All right, how did I run this thing? Well, I took the basic crew. So I talked about earlier, if you want to minimize the effect of the derpy gun, you're going to have to invest in good crew, good equipment, and a good setup for your tank. I didn't necessarily do that. I just ran the brand new crew. I ended up getting up to 88% by running some reserves and stuff in the 20 battles I played. So this was the crew that came with the tank. I just did that. You know, it's a premium. That's kind of one of the things you do with it. So you train up a crew and you throw it into one of your other American TDs that you want to have a better crew in. Do it to taste, but I'm telling you, if you put a better crew in it, you'll probably get a few better results. I know I probably would have. The modules, obviously 100%. So I am running a gun laying drive, a gun rammer, and camouflage net. Now I'll be honest, I probably should have run a binoculars or the coated optics over the gun laying drive. The gun laying drive is a fairly situational item. So I think most people would probably run one of these two, more than likely coated optics, just to give you that bonus constantly. The dark horse is the binocular telescope, and this does not have a vert stab, which is why I'm not running it. I would run the vert stab if it had one, but it doesn't. So I don't think this is an optimal setup right here, and if I had to do it again, I'd probably throw some optics. You know, for me, to be quite honest, I'd put the binoculars on. I just kind of like that type of gameplay. But I think the best answer really would be the coated optics for most people. That 370 view range with coated optics and a good crew, as I just talked about, is really going to give this thing a bit of an advantage. I ran with 10 APCR. I didn't tend to shoot too much of it unless I ran into a lot of tier 8s. But to be honest, with the low-ish pen on it, you may want to be relying on a bit of your gold out there. I only carried 2 HE. It's a 90mm, so the HE is okay. It's not fantastic, but it can mess up small scouts, things like that. I tend to shy away from HE. It seems to let me down constantly, but I did carry 2. You never know. I'm carrying a large kit, large fire extinguisher. Probably could run food in there. It is a light tank. I'm going to say it's probably susceptible to lighting on fire, but I'm trying to think. I don't believe I was ever lit on fire once. And that could just be dumb luck. Plus, when you're running a large fire extinguisher, it decreases your chance. So again, going back to the derpiness of the gun, if you really want to hang it out there and you really expect to be as stealthy as possible and stay out of any fights where you're seen as much as possible, you could ditch the large fire extinguisher or go with food. And then, of course, if you want to run some directives, go with something that's going to either help your vision range or help your gunnery in some way. And that was my setup. Let's move on to 3 examples. All right, here's one of my early efforts. This is an all tier 6 battle on Lakeville. Pretty good setup for a TD if I can get some long range shots. Or not as great if I'm forced to get into the town and start to brawl. But I'm going to come around here. We'll take a look and see if we can't find some guys on the road. See how big the bloom is and how long it takes relatively for that thing to zoom in. If you're familiar with the Hellcats kind of derpiness, then this one is a little bit worse, but at least you'll be familiar with how you want to run the tank as far as aiming in and where you want to go to pre-aim, things like that. So 178 Bravo goes into the middle. We're taking a look and seeing if somebody shows up. I'm going to spend a little bit of time shooting into bushes. This is a low percentage play right here, and I'm not really seeing anything. Probably should have just pushed into the town. If I had to do it over again, I would do that, especially based on how many guys we had pushing into town. We might have been able to keep a couple of those guys alive. Let's see how this plays out here. Just sort of looking. Nobody shows up on the middle. That surprised me a little bit. The AMD's not seeing anything. The other T78 is hanging back on the sniper position, and we've only got 1 tank in the middle. Although they managed to take out the 1 light that was in town. And it looks like another guy that was within there, right? Yeah. And they've got a good push, so I'm going to turn around thinking, well, shoot. This is odd. This is a bit different, but let's react to it. They've got a pretty good force pushing through. We'll just swing back. Look how far our guys have pushed through in the south, but they're now running into a little bit stiffer resistance between the KV-2 and the Cromwell. They're going to have to be careful that they don't overextend right there and get beat up by the enemy team's campers. But I'm going to come back here, and now we're just going to bush up, and we're going to wait. And I'm thinking, surely these guys won't just drive across the open. And quit calling me Shirley. There it is. I'll just fire in there and miss. Just kind of a bad lead fire. I'm pretty sure I was well behind him by the time I took that shot. All of a sudden they're on the cap, and that's interesting there, isn't it? It took a while for me to see him, and I think he actually moved forward before I could, even though it was right on the edge of my spotting there. So there was a case where those optics or binocs would have really done me well. And I'm too close to the bush. And the good news is that I don't pay for it right now. Unfortunately, the T75 is about to come to the left side of the bush. I take that shot in there, but now I'm spotted by that guy. So I'm going to come all the way back here, try to put the rock between me and the other guys. And there's a good example of not waiting long enough, and it just misses. It just whiffs because it just takes so long to zoom in. There we go. And if you wait till it's all the way zoomed in, you're going to find yourself with a much better firing solution. Down goes the scout, and pretty much it's clean up on aisle 2. I'm going to let the zoom all the way in. Just as it gets to the bottom of the zoom, I'll take that shot. And down goes the 3001. I'm already cruising through here, and just look how long it takes. Come on, zoom, zoom. Oh, right over top, the low profile of the 13F3. It just goes right over him. And now this dude jumps into the water, which I take a shot. See how far off to the left it was? That was absolutely to the left side. But the bloom was so huge right there. I was attempting just to get a lucky snap on him before he got away, but there was also a rock in between the two of us. Now I'm trying to find him, but he seems to be in some kind of weird valley. Down he goes to the bottom of the lake. Just take a prayer shot. It whiffs over to the left anyway. And now the KV-2 is moving into town. Last thing you want to do is let him derp 2 or 3 of us without taking any damage. So let's see if we can find this dude. I'll go ahead and get back up here under the sniper position. The KV-2 lived. See how they basically beat all of our guys that extended in there? Just a bad shot. I miss taking the shot before I'm only hitting his angle. Whatever I'm trying to say. I shoot too early. Or too late. What did I do? I shot too late. That's what I did. KV-2. Now that snap actually hit him, but it didn't track him, unfortunately. So now I've got a good zoom, and if he shows back up, there we go. So that's a good firing solution. We'll put one into him right there. I do not have Sixth Sense, so that was a bit of an issue for me. I did have to be careful as far as just kind of assuming a lot of times I was lit. And in the times I did not assume I was lit, I often found myself getting obliterated. Then that's a big contributor to 45%. A tank like this, you really don't want to run without Sixth Sense. Now all of a sudden we got these two guys, and here goes the Artie. The Artie's going to make a runner. He's trying to suicide. Somehow he doesn't die going into the water, but that's okay because I've got him. And he's not going to have the time. I'll just auto-aim, and down he goes. We kill the Artie before he is able to kill himself. Cromwell shoots, and the poor guy gets a crit, no damage, and we'll finish him off for 1,434. I believe there's actually a blind shot maybe in there. I think there's some more damage coming my way there. 3 kills, and a good example at same tier of staying back, right? For the most part being unlit for most of the game, surviving towards the end of the game with enough hit points to move around to where if you do get spotted late game, it's not as big a deal. Cromwell obviously didn't even damage me, but there you go. Let's move on to the second example. Alright, for the second example, we're on Red Shire, and I'm middle tier. A tier 6 and a tier 7 battle with 3 different tiers, and we are going to, from the south spawn on encounter mode, we'll head up this hill and we'll use this bush. This sniper position used to be fantastic before they changed this map. It is still usable, but you do have to be careful because it's quite easy to be spotted right here, especially if a scout goes onto the middle ridge right about here. There's a couple bushes here. I'll just kind of point them out for you. Right there. So they get into that bush, and if you fire, if you're poked too far forward and you fire, they will absolutely see you. So I'm going to watch, try to be as careful as possible there, and if I can, I'll back up to take the shot. So I'm looking at that bush, wondering if there's somebody in there, and I see a leopard. So we'll back up a little bit, and we'll just take a shot across the way there, and I just fire way behind him. That's one of the things that's very difficult with a tank that has such a slow-moving turret. Oftentimes you can get in a little bit of a PIO trying to get your shots on these guys, and then I bounce Armor not penetrated. Looks like I got a bad angle right there, and clearly I was seen. The artillery fires at me. It's possible he was just blind firing the bush, but more than likely either the Leopard or somebody else in one of these bushes saw me. And I might be taking a slight chance to come out this early, but we'll just drop one into the side of the T-25 too. And I will just courtesy back up, assuming I got spotted every time. So we'll do that for a while until there's less guns in the game, or I know where all of the scouts are. Right? So I need to find out where they all are before I can have any kind of confidence that there's not somebody in that bush ready to light me every time I fire. So our guys are near the cap. That means they're going to be forced to move in that direction. And I'm looking at him thinking, well, I can't really pin his front, but if he does something like that, then I'll get a nice shot into his side. The other thing I want to watch out for here is backing up too much. And the reason why is if they're sitting over here, they'll have shots. There's a sniper nest right here. They may get shots across, or if they're up on this little V right here, waiting for us to come through. If you back out too much, they may have shots on your back. Now I've got the Leopard hanging around. There we go. Nicely fully zoomed shot. Goes more or less where I shot, and fairly comfortable when you do that. I've got the T-25 too. We'll wait for it to zoom in all the way, and we'll just drop a nice little shot onto his side. Coming out a bit early, but I'm taking the chance because I feel like I can go ahead and maybe finish off the T-25/2. And unfortunately, that one goes high. That one goes high, and we do not kill him. I'm watching the fight behind me on the minimap. I want to make sure that if those two lose, I get out of here, so that IS-2 or any other friends he may have does not come up and light me. I considered coming down to help him. The reason I did not is because I'm, again, still worried about this sniper position over here. T-25, or the 25 TP comes out, and I miss a chance on a shot. I'm kind of not paying attention. And I don't have everything lit, right? I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tanks. 6 tanks, 3 arty, and 1 dead. That's only 10. There's still 5 guys that have not really been lit. Let's see the T-43. And then I'm thinking, well, I think they're guessing. I think one of the artillery took a guess shot in there knowing I'm there. It might be some of those guys over on the ridge are clicking on that bush. They know that that's where the shots are coming from. Put another one in there. And I'll be honest, I'm probably going a few too many times to the well here. We're starting to lose, but I really don't have any way to move forward. And I'm hoping that we can get some of this going on, where we can just find these guys. That one just plain old misses. Didn't quite wait till it was completely zoomed. Let's see if we can get him here. There it is. There's a nice shot. So I don't really have a place I can go right now that isn't watched. So we'll just stick here for a minute. Little blind shot in there as he backs up, and that's good news. The IS-2 dies, and that is very, very helpful. That gives me a little more freedom over here on the east side. So we'll see if we can find something. I'm just going to blind shot in here. I'll know I hit if I reset the cap, but I did not. And we're a little light on that hill now, right? We've been beaten up a little bit. We got 3 of us over here. Only the M4 and E25 on the other side. I'd really rather not the guys on the hill just YOLO in, but we do need to know where these dudes are. And they happen to be on the other side. Good news is we have 3 artillery, and once these guys are lit, they'll take all kinds of hit. I missed that the dude on the right was lit. There's the ELC. He comes up, and he kind of foolishly sits in one spot. I take a bit of a chance he shot and missed, but then he just stops, and this is very fortunate for me right here. This is going to let me completely zoom in, and even though he's dark, he goes down. And now it's clean up on L2. That was the scout. I was not sure of where he was. And even so, I got spotted moving out. See that? Somebody took a shot. And it may have been the... And I don't think it was the ELC. I was thinking it might have been the ELC, but I don't think he could have seen me from there. But somebody saw me break cover and come out. Probably the Hellcat. You see him right there? So he was more than likely... The Hellcat was more than likely in these bushes right here with binocs, or at least enough spotting that as soon as I came out of that bush, he saw me coming downhill right there. I have just the edge of the T-25 if he backs up, but he dies. We'll come back over here and we'll start dueling with the Hellcat. I'm worried about the artillery, but it's cleanup time, so I'm just looking for some hit points at this moment. Problem with artillery and this tank and a Hellcat is if they hit you, it's just going to really suck. That was a little behind him. I got lucky. I light him on fire. He uses a extinguisher. No, he doesn't, and he dies. I put a shot there. Get a little bit lucky with a bit of a snap. I should have just poked right up, but I was still trying to avoid getting artied. I might have got that shot if I'd have just come back and accepted the T77 shot back at me. And there's the arty. And thank goodness he missed. He only got 5 out of it. Which makes me think, you know what? Fine, Artie. I'll just let the T67 go die to the E25 and the rest of those guys. And I will come over here where you are and see if I can either get some spotting or some damage or a little of both. Just blitz on in here. There he is. And he turns. And I fire. And he blasts me. Ouch. 566. And down goes the other Artie. And that, folks, is why you don't want to be hit by Artie in one of these things. Nearly taken out in a one shot by a same tier artillery in a soft little TD. Another example there then, even one tier down, of if you stay back enough but you've got your gun in the game, you can be effective and be a part of the win. 2,400 damage and 3 kills, one tier down. Let's go to the third example, bottom tier. Our third example is here on Overlord, bottom tier. I'm going to come up to the sniper position, but we've already got a scrum going on in the middle. So I'm going to take advantage of my lights going in and basically spreading the shots around a bit. Everyone's busy shooting at the lights, so I feel like I can get in here and get a few shots into these guys. T-37's not paying much attention. It's a pretty long reload, really, for a tier 6 tank. I get a little auto aim on that guy. Now I'm able to back out. I take a hit from the 1357. And we survive it, and it's 2-1. So it really took a lot of hits right there. This is a pretty decent place to try to hang out in the bush, get some free shots. T50-2 is still hiding. The BIS is on the back edge. And we have a really good force over here on the east side. And right now I'm calculating, thinking, all right, now how do I move forward? Now there's the 1357, and I don't know if he actually hit me from that spot or what, but I'm able to drop that fully zoomed shot on top of him. T25/2 is facing up 3 or 4 of our tanks, and then I've got the T29 pushing across, and I feel like, all right, that is enough force for me to move up as well and be a little bit more aggressive, even though I would consider this more of a support type of effort with the T78. I am moving forward because we've pushed the line such that I can do that. Plus, I know that these bushes are here, and it's a good position of cover to support guys moving in like the Cromwell and the T29. And we're going to have targets everywhere. We've got a good advantage, but the trick here is to push that advantage without YOLOing so that we can continue to whittle hit points and not lose them. This guy really needs to go away, so I'll just auto-aim him. Some damage on that guy. He's just about dead. I'm thinking, okay, good to go. T29 took a lot of damage moving in there. But that allowed the lights to get in and do some good work. Now I've got some kind of crazy stuff in the way. I'm thinking, yes, no. That goes into a building's roof. There's just looks like a little tiny V for a shot there, and we'll come back down this way. And we've got the Achilles, looks to be AFK. That's a big help for us, obviously. One gun out of the game. And we find a TD. I got to come up a little bit. Even though I'm -10 gun depression, it takes a little bit up and over before I get a shot. And I'm going to take that shot and back out. Again, I don't have 6th sense, and I'm not completely covered with bushes anyway right there. So I'm going to be a little bit careful. We got just the edge of this guy. That one looks like it goes into the ground, unfortunately. And now we've got another shot potentially on the WZ. 120 FT. Put a shot into his back as he attempts to hide in that little emplacement. The IKV's done. There's the Emil. The Emil's making a runner. He's looking for cover. I was really hoping to track him right there. I was trying to aim a little bit towards the back end. And he's going to sneak around that bunker before. I thought he might just drive around and try to get a shot on the Scorpion, but he doesn't. And instead of wait for him, I feel like all those guys have him cornered. He's not going to last very long, so let's turn. Notice how relatively slow the whole turn was And it took me a while to do that. And then I noticed that he'd come back out, so I just snap one, looking for some luck, and it ends up happening for me there. Brings me up to 1958. We'll head on around this away. We got a T79, an E2 Jumbo, and an A40, whatever it is. And I believe, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is my effort. I don't know if I actually take the dive on this guy or not. I think he dies before I can get there. He dies before I can get there. So now I should have just swung and taken a shot at this guy. There we go. Oh, ricochet. And then I try to drive, and then I'm like, oh, crud, I went down. I'm on the soap rock. I can't back up. So now I really have to go downhill. So, bit of a misplay there. I probably had 2 shots in there I could have got, and I may have actually got the kill on him. We end up, oh, I did get the kill, sorry, but I only did 117. So this, I got the last shot on that guy. 3 kills, 2,075 damage, 140 assist. But again, a third example, really. All my decent games in this tank more or less went the way that I showed you on those 3. The problem with that is, well, we'll get that in just a minute. Let's wrap it up, and I'll tell you what the problem with that is in just a second here. All right, that's it for the T78 Tier 6 American TD. The style on here is called the Federalist, and it is removable, but it only goes on the T78. So you can put other camo on there if you want, but you're not able to use the Federalist style on anything else. I think it looks pretty cool, so I left it. What I was talking about on the last replay review right there is the problem with the style of gameplay that I did is if you start early doing that and your team folds or loses a lot of tanks early, it's very difficult for a tank like this to make a comeback, unless the enemy just kind of walks into it blindly. So what I found is I would set up for a support kind of idea, the team would lose wholesale another flank where I wasn't, and I had a very hard time attempting to do anything with that. And like I said, once you get spotted, you're in trouble. So if you lose a lot of map control and you don't have places to run away to and stay away from people, then you will run into trouble. But if you can have a team that is at least holding the line, allowing you to get some shots in there while you're playing the support role, later on when there's less guns in the game, then you can turn into a situational medium or scout from there. But if you attempt to run as a scout or medium early game in this, you're going to have a hard time and end up dying quite a bit. Overall, I like the tank. It's a slightly worse Hellcat as a premium, but I think that's great because that's what premiums used to be. It's a fun tank. It's a good tank. It's not as good as some of the tech tree tanks at tier 6, but I think that's just right. And it does a good job training. It makes a decent amount of credits. Just a fun little tank, nice and mobile, has a turret, all the good things that a fun tank has. And even as a TD with a turret, that's always a good thing. So I recommend it. It's a good tier 6 tank. Nothing really wrong with it, but it's not overpowered, and I do appreciate that about it. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you guys checking out the channel. Leave me a sub if you want. Otherwise, we will see you.